We are going to finish up in First Kings. It'll be chapter 21 and chapter 22, and then we will begin in Second Kings and read chapters 1 through 4. God bless you, and thank you for joining me today during this reading. I am reading out of the Interlinear Bible. It is the Hebrew and the Aramaic translation of the Old Testament. Chapter 21 of First Kings. And it happened after these things, Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard in Jezreel, near the place of Ahab the king of Samaria. And Ahab spoke to Naboth, saying, Give me your vineyard, and it shall be a garden of green herbs for me, for it is near my house, and I will give to you in its place a better vineyard than it. If it is good in your eyes, I will give you silver to you the price of this one. And Naboth said to Ahab, Far be it from me by Jehovah that I should give the inheritance of my fathers to you. And Ahab came into his house sullen and angry over the word which Naboth the Jezreelite spoke to him. For he had said, I will not give the inheritance of my fathers to you. And he lay on his bed and turned away his face, and would not eat food. And his wife Jezebel came in to him, and said to him, Why is your spirit sullen, that you are not eating food? And he said to her, Because I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite, and said to him, Give me your vineyard for silver, or if you desire, I will give you a vineyard in its place. And he said, I will not give you my vineyard. And his wife Jezebel said to him, Do you now rule over Israel? Rise up, eat food, and let your heart be good. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. And she wrote letters in the name of Ahab, and sealed with his seal, and sent the letters to the elders and to the nobles in his city, dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote in the letters, saying, Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth at the head of the people, and set two men, sons of worthlessness, across from him. And they shall testify of him, saying, You have cursed God and the king. And they shall bring him out and stone him, and he shall die. And the men of the city, the elders and the nobles who lived in his city, did as Jezebel had sent to them, and was written in the letters, as was written in the letters that she sent to them. They proclaimed a fast, and caused Naboth to sit at the head of the people. And two men, sons of worthlessness, came in and sat across from him. And the men of worthlessness testified of him before the people, even Naboth, saying, Naboth has cursed God and the king. And they took him out to the outside of the city, and stoned him with stones, and he died. And they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth has been stoned, and he is dead. And it happened when Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned and was dead, Jezebel said to Ahab, Rise up, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, that he refused to give you for silver. For Naboth is not alive, but dead. And it happened when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, Ahab rose to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. And the word of Jehovah came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Rise up, go down to meet Ahab the king of Israel, who is in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone down to possess it. And you shall speak to him, saying, So says Jehovah, Have you murdered, and also taken possession? And you shall speak to him, saying, So says Jehovah, In the place where the dogs lick the blood of Naboth, so the dogs shall lick your blood, even yours. And Ahab said to Elijah, Have you found me, O my enemy? And he said, I have found you, because you have sold yourself to do that which is evil in the eyes of Jehovah. Behold, I shall bring evil on you, and shall take away your posterity, and cut off to Ahab him who urinates against a wall, both bond and free in Israel. And I shall give up your house like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah, because of the provocation with which you have provoked to anger, and have caused Israel to sin. And also Jehovah had spoken of Jezebel, saying, The dogs shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. He who dies of Ahab in the city, the dogs shall eat, and the birds of the heaven shall eat him who dies in a field. Surely none has been like Ahab, who sold himself to do that which was evil in the eyes of Jehovah, whom his wife Jezebel incited. And he did abominably to go after idols according to all that the Amorites did, whom Jehovah expelled before the sons of Israel. And it happened when Ahab heard these words, he tore his garments and put sackcloth on his flesh, and fasted and lay in sackcloth and went softly. And the word of Jehovah came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Have you seen that Ahab has been humbled before me? Because he was humbled before me, I will not bring the evil in his days. I will bring the evil on his house in the days of his son. 1 Kings chapter 22. And they continued 3 years. There was no war between Syria and Israel. And it happened in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat the king of Judah came down to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel said to his servants, Have you known that Ramoth Gilead is ours, and we show laziness by not taking it from the king of Syria's hand? And he said to Jehoshaphat, Will you go to battle with me to Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as you, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, Please inquire at the word of Jehovah today. And the king of Israel gathered the prophets, about 400 men, and said to them, Shall I go to battle against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I forbear? And they said, Go up, that the Lord may give it into the hand of the king. And Jehoshaphat said, Is there not here a prophet of Jehovah, besides that we might inquire of him? And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, Yet one man to seek Jehovah by him. But I hate him, for he does not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. Micaiah, the son of Amiah. And Jehoshaphat said, Let not the king say so. And the king of Israel called to a certain eunuch, and said, Cause Micaiah, the son of Amiah, to hurry. And the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, each was sitting on his throne, having put on their robes in a grain floor, in the entrance of the gate of Samaria. And all the prophets prophesied before them. And Zedekiah, the son of Shanani, made horns of iron for himself. And he said, So says Jehovah, With these you shall push the Syrians until you have consumed them. And all the prophets were prophesying so, saying, Go up to Ramoth Gilead and prosper, for Jehovah shall give it into the king's hand. And the messenger that had gone to call Micaiah spoke to him, saying, Behold, now the words of the prophets with one mouth are good to the king. Please let your word be as the word of one of them, and speak good. And Micaiah said, As Jehovah lives, surely that which Jehovah says to me, that I will speak. And he came in to the king, and the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go to battle to Ramoth Gilead, or shall we forbear? And he said to him, Go up and prosper, and Jehovah shall give it into the king's hand. And the king said to him, How many times have I adjured you that you shall speak nothing to me but truth in the name of Jehovah? And he said, I have seen all Israel scattered on the hills like sheep that have no shepherd. And Jehovah said, These have no ruler. They shall each return to his house in peace. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, Did I not say to you, he will not prophesy good of me, but evil? And he said, Therefore hear the word of Jehovah. I saw Jehovah sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven were standing by him, on his right and on his left. And Jehovah said, Who shall entice Ahab? And he shall go up and fall in Ramoth Gilead. And this one said this, and this one said that. And the Spirit came forth and stood before Jehovah, and said, I surely will I entice him. And Jehovah said to him, By what means? And he said, I will go out, and shall be a spirit of falsehood in the mouth of his prophets. And he said, You shall entice him, and also you are able. Go out and do so. And now behold, Jehovah has put a spirit of falsehood in the mouth of all these prophets of yours, and Jehovah has spoken evil as to you. And Zedekiah the son of Chenaneh came near and struck Micaiah on the cheek, and said, Where did the Spirit of Jehovah pass over from me to speak with you? And Micaiah said, Behold, you shall see on that day when you go into the innermost room to be hidden. And the king of Israel said, Take Micaiah and return him to Ammon, the ruler of the city, and to Joash, the king's son. And you shall say, So says the king, Put this one in the house of restraint, and cause him to eat the bread of oppression and the water of oppression until I come in peace. And Micaiah said, If you at all return in peace, Jehovah had not spoken by me. And he said, Hear, O people, all of them. And the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat the king of Judah went up to Ramoth Gilead. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and enter into the battle, but you put on your robes. And the king of Israel disguised himself and went into the battle. And the king of Syria commanded the 32 commanders of the chariots, saying, You shall not fight with small or great, but with the king of Israel. And it happened when the commanders of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, they said, Surely he is the king of Israel. And they turned aside to fight with him. And Jehoshaphat cried out. And it happened when the commanders of the chariots saw that he was not the king of Israel, they turned back from following him. And a man drew a bow in his simplicity, and he struck the king of Israel between the joints and the breastplate. And he said to his charioteer, Turn your hand and take me out from the battle, for I have been wounded. And on that day the battle went on, and the king was caused to stand up in the chariot against Syria. And he died in the evening, and the blood of the wound poured out in the middle of the chariot. And the cry passed through the camp when the sun went down, saying, Each to his city, and each to his land. And the king died and came to Samaria. And they buried the king in Samaria. And they rinsed the chariots by the pool of Samaria, and the dogs licked up his blood when he had washed the armor according to the word of Jehovah that he spoke. And the rest of the acts of Ahab, and all that he did, and the house of ivory that he built, and all the cities that he built, are they not written in the books of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Ahab lay with his fathers, and his son Ahaziah reigned in his place. And Jehoshaphat, the son of Asa, reigned over Judah in the 4th year of Ahab the king of Israel. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Shilhi. And he walked in all the ways of his father Asa. He did not turn aside from it, doing right in the eyes of Jehovah, but the high places were not taken away. The people offered and burned incense yet in the high places. And Jehoshaphat made peace with the king of Israel. And the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, and his might that he showed, and how he warred, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And he took out of the land the rest of the Sodomites, which remained in the days of his father Asa. No king was in Edom. A deputy was king. Jehoshaphat had 10 ships of Tarshish to go to Ophir for gold. But they did not go, for the ships were broken at Ezion Geber. Then Ahaziah, the king of Ahab, said to Jehoshaphat, Let my servants go with your servants in the ships. But Jehoshaphat was not willing, and Jehoshaphat lay with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of his father David. And his son Jehoram, reigned in his place. Uzziah, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel in Samaria the 17th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and reigned 2 years over Israel. And he did evil in the eyes of Jehovah, and walked in the way of his father, and in the way of his mother, and in the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, for he served Baal, and bowed to it, and provoked to anger Jehovah the God of Israel, according to all his father had done. 2 Kings chapter 1. And Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab, and Ahaziah fell through the lattice in his upper room in Samaria and was sick. And he sent messengers and said to them, Go ask of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, if I will recover from this sickness. And an angel of Jehovah spoke to Elijah the Tishbite, Rise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say to them, Is it because there is not a God in Israel that you are going to ask of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? And therefore, so says Jehovah, You shall not come down from that bed on which you have gone up, but you shall surely die. And Elijah departed. And the messengers returned to him, and he said to them, What is this that you have turned back? And they said to him, A man came up to meet us, and said to us, Go, return to the king who sent you. And you shall say to him, So says Jehovah, Is it because there is not a God in Israel that you are sending to ask of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore you shall not come down from the bed on which you have gone up, for you shall certainly die. And he said to them, What was the fashion of the man who came up to meet you, and spoke these words to you? And they said to him, A hairy man, and a girdle of leather was girded about his loins. And he said, He is Elijah the Tishbite. And the king sent to him the commander of 50 with his 50. And he went up to him, and behold, he was sitting on the top of the hill. And he spoke to him, O man of God, the king has said, Come down. And Elijah answered and said to the commander of 50, And if I am a man of God, fire will come down from the heavens and consume you and your 50. And fire came down from the heavens and consumed him and his 50. And he turned and sent another commander of 50 and his 50 to him. And he answered and said to him, O man of God, so says the king, hurry, come down. And Elijah answered and said to them, If I am a man of God, fire will come down from the heavens and will consume you and your 50. And fire from God came down from the heavens and consumed him and his 50. And he turned and sent a third commander of 50 and his 50. And the third commander of 50 went up and came and fell on his knees before Elijah and begged him and said to him, O man of God, please let my life and the life of your servants, these 50, be precious in your eyes. Behold, fire has come down from the heavens and has consumed the two commanders of the former 50s and their 50s. And now, let my life be precious in your eyes. And the angel of Jehovah spoke to Elijah, Go down with him. Do not be afraid of him. And he rose up and went down with him to the king. And he said to him, So says Jehovah, because you have sent messengers to ask of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, is it because there is not a God in Israel to inquire of his word? Therefore you shall not come down from the bed on which you have gone up, for you shall certainly die. And he died, according to the word of Jehovah that Elijah spoke. And Jehoram reigned in his place in the 2nd year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, for he had no sons. And the rest of the acts of Isaiah that he did, are they not written in the books? Or book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Chapter 2 of 2 Kings. And it happened when Jehovah was to take up Elijah to heaven in a tempest, Elijah and Elisha went from Gilgal. And Elijah said to Elisha, Please stay here, for Jehovah has sent me to Bethel. And Elisha said, As Jehovah lives and your soul lives, I will not leave you. And they went down to Bethel. And the sons of the prophets in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, Do you know that today Jehovah will take your Lord from your head? And he said, Yes, I know. Keep silent. And Elijah said to him, Elisha, please stay here, for Jehovah has sent me to Jericho. And he said, As Jehovah lives, and your soul lives. I will not leave you. And they came into Jericho. And the sons of the prophets of Jericho came near to Elisha, and said to him, Do you know that today Jehovah will take away your Lord from your head? And he said, Yes, I know. Keep silent. And Elijah said to him, Please stay here, for Jehovah has sent me to the Jordan. And he said, As Jehovah lives, and your soul lives, I will not leave you. And they went on, both of them, and 50 men of the sons of the prophets went on and stood afar off, across from them, and they both stood by the Jordan. And Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up, and struck the waters, and they were divided here and there, so that they both went over on dry ground. And it happened when they were crossing, Elijah said to Elisha, Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you. And Elisha said, Then let there now be a double mouth of your spirit on me. And he said, You have asked a hard thing. If you shall see me taken from you, it shall be so to you. And if not, it shall not be. And it happened as they were going on and speaking, behold, a chariot of fire and horses of fire came. And they separated between them both, and Elijah went up in a tempest to heaven. And Elisha was watching, and he was crying, My father, the chariot of Israel, it and its horsemen. And he did not see him again. And he took hold of his garments and tore them into 2 pieces. And he lifted up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him, and turned back and stood on the lip of the Jordan. And he took Elijah's mantle that had fallen from him, and struck the waters, and said, Where is Jehovah, the God of Elijah, even he? And he struck the waters, and they were split in 2 here and there. And Elisha crossed over. And when they saw him, the sons of the prophets across in Jericho, then they said, The spirit of Elijah has rested on Elisha. And they came to meet him and bowed to the earth to him. And they said to him, Behold now, there are with your servants 50 men, mighty sons. Please let them go. They shall seek your Lord, lest the Spirit of Jehovah has taken him up, and has cast him on one of the mountains, or into one of the valleys. And he said, You shall not send. And they pressed on him until he was ashamed. And he said, Send. And they sent 50 men. And they sought 3 days and did not find him. And they returned to him, and he was staying in Jericho. And he said to them, Did I not say to you, Do not go? And the men of the city said to Elisha, Behold, now the sight of the city is good, as my Lord sees, but the waters are bad, and the ground causes barrenness. And he said, Bring a new dish to me, and put salt there. And they took it to him, and he went out to the source of the waters, and threw salt there, and said, So says Jehovah, I have given healing to these waters. There shall not be death and sterility there any more. And the waters were healed to this day, according to the word of Elijah that he spoke. And he went up from there to Bethel, and he was going up in the highway. And little boys came out from the city and mocked him, and said to him, Go up, bald head, go up, bald head. And he turned behind him and saw them, and declared them vile in the name of Jehovah. And 2 bears came out of the forest, and tore 42 boys of them. And he went from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria. Chapter 3 of 2 Kings. And Jehoram, the son of Ahab, reigned over Israel in Samaria, in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, and he reigned 12 years, and he did that which was evil in the eyes of Jehovah, only not like his father and his mother, for he put away the pillar of Baal that his father had made, but he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. He did not turn aside from it. And Mesha, the king of Moab, was a sheep master, and he paid 100,000 lambs to the king of Israel, and 100,000 rams with wool. And it happened when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. And King Jehoram went out in that day from Samaria and called up all Israel. And he went and sent Jehoshaphat the king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am as you, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. And he said, which way shall we go up? And he answered, the way through the wilderness of Edom. And the king of Israel went, and the king of Judah, and the king of Edom. And they made a circuit of 7 days' journey. And there was no water for the army and for the livestock that were at their feet. And the king of Israel said, alas, that Jehovah has called these 3 kings to deliver them into the hand of Moab. And Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of Jehovah, that we may inquire of Jehovah by him? And one of the servants of the king of Israel answered and said, here is Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who poured water on the hands of Elijah. And Jehoshaphat said, the word of Jehovah is with him. And the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. And Elisha said to the king of Israel, what have I to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and to the prophets of your mother. And the king of Israel said to him, no, for Jehovah has called these 3 kings in order to give them into the hand of Moab. And Elisha said, as Jehovah of hosts lives, before whom I stand, surely, if I did not regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not look toward you, nor see you. And now bring a minstrel to me. And it happened when the minstrel played, the hand of Jehovah was on him. And he said, so says Jehovah, make this valley full of ditches. For so says Jehovah, you shall not see wind, nor shall you see rain. Yet that stream bed shall be filled with water, so that you may drink, both you and your livestock, and your animals. But this is a light thing in the eyes of Jehovah. He also has given Moab into your hand, and you shall strike every fortified city, and every choice city, and you shall fail every good tree, and you shall stop all the fountains of water, and you shall mar every good portion with stones. And it happened in the morning when the food offering was caused to go up, behold, water came by the way of Edom, and the country was filled with water. And all Moab had heard that the king had come up to fight against them. And they were called together, every one able to gird on a girdle and upward. And they stood by the border, and they rose up early in the morning, and the sun was shining on the water. And the Moabites saw the water on the opposite side as red as blood. And they said, this is blood. The kings surely have fought one another. And they each man struck his neighbor, and now to the plunder Moab. And they came to the camp of Israel, and the Israelites rose up and struck the Moabites. And they fled from before them, and they entered it and struck Moab. And they broke down the cities, and they each man cast his stone on every good piece of land, and filled it. And they stopped every fountain of water, and they felled every good tree, until there was left only Kirhaseth with its stones. But the slingers surrounded it and struck it. And when the king of Moab saw that the battle was too strong for him, then he took with him 700 men who drew swords to break through to the king of Edom. And they were not able. And he took his son, the firstborn, who would reign in his place, and caused him to go up for a burnt offering on the wall. And there was great wrath against Israel. And they left him and returned to the land. 2 Kings chapter 4. And a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets had cried to Elisha, saying, my husband your servant is dead. And you know that your servant has seen Jehovah, and the lender has come to take my 2 children to himself for slaves. And Elisha said to her, what shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? And she said, your handmaid has nothing in the house except a pot of oil. And he said, go beg vessels for yourself from outside, from your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not let them be few. And you shall go in and shut the door on you and on your son, and shall pour out into all these vessels, and you shall set aside the full ones. And she left him and shut the door on her and on her sons. And they carried to her, and she poured out. And it happened, when the vessels were full, she said to her son, Bring another vessel to me. And he said to her, There is no other vessel. The oil stopped. And she came and told the man of God, and he said, Go sell the oil and repay your loan, and you and your son shall live from the rest. And the day came that Elisha crossed over to Shunem, and a great woman was there. And she laid hold on him to eat bread. And it happened, as often as he passed by, he turned aside there to eat bread. And she said to her husband, Behold, now I know that he is a holy man of God, who passes by us continually. Now let us make a little walled roof room, and let us set a bed up for him there, and a table, and a chair, and a lampstand. And it shall be, when he comes to us, he shall turn in there. And the day came when he came in there, and turned into the roof room, and lay there. And he said to his young man, Gehazi, Call this Shunammite. And he called her, and she stood before him. And he said to him, Now say to her, Behold, you have trembled with all this care for us. What shall I do for you? Shall I speak to the king for you, or to the army commander? And she said, I live among my people. And he said, What then shall I do for her? And Gehazi said, Truly there is no son to her, and her husband is old. And he said, Call for her. And he called for her, and she stood at the door. And he said, At this season, according to the time of life, you shall embrace a son. And she said, No, my lord. O man of God, do not lie to your handmaid. And the woman conceived and bore a son. At this season, according to the time of life that Elijah spoke to her. And the boy grew, and the day came that he went out to his father, to the reapers. And he said to his father, My head, my head. And he said to the young man, Carry him to his mother. And he carried him and brought him to his mother. And he sat on her knees until noon, and died. And she went up and laid on him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door on him, and went out. And she called to her husband, and said, Please send to me one of the young men, and one of the asses, and I shall run to the man of God, and return. And he said, Why are you going to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, Peace. And she saddled the ass, and said to her young man, Lead on, and go. Do not hold back riding for me, except I speak to you. And she went and came to the man of God, to Mount Carmel. And it happened, when the man of God saw her from afar, he said to his young man, Gehazi, Behold, the Shunammite. Now please run to meet her, and say to her, Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the boy? And she said, Well. And she came to the mountain, to the man of God, and lay hold on his feet. And Gehazi came near to thrust her away. But the man of God said, Let her alone, for her soul is bitter in her, and Jehovah has hidden it from me, and has not told me. And she said, Did I ask a son from my Lord? Did I not say, Do not deceive me? And he said to Gehazi, Gird up your loins, and take my staff in your hand, and go. When you meet a man, you shall not greet him, and when a man shall greet you, you shall not answer him. And you shall lay my staff on the face of the boy. And the mother of the boy said, As Jehovah lives, and your soul lives, I will not leave you. And he rose up and went after her. And Gehazi passed on before them, and laid the staff on the face of the boy. But there was no voice, and there was no hearing. And he turned back to meet him, and told him, saying, The boy has not awakened. And Elisha came into the house, and behold, the boy was dead, laid out on his bed. And he went in and shut the door on both of them, and prayed to Jehovah. And he went up and lay down on the boy, and put his mouth on his mouth, and his eyes on his eyes, and his palms on his palms, and he stretched himself on him. And the flesh of the boy became warm, and he returned and walked in the house. once here and once there. He went up and stretched himself on him, and the boy sneezed 7 times. And the boy opened his eyes, and he called Gehazi and said, Call to this Shunammite. And he called her, and she came to him, and he said, Take up your son. And she went in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the earth, and took up her son and went out. And Elisha returned to Gilgal. And the famine was in the land, and the sons of the prophets were sitting before him. And he said to his young men, Set on the big pot and boil soup for the sons of the prophets. And one went out to the field to gather herbs, and found a vine of the field, and gathered gourds from it in the field. And with the lap of his garment full, he came in and shredded them into the pot of soup, for they did not know. And they poured out for the men to eat. And it happened, when they were eating the soup, they cried out and said, Death is in the pot, O man of God. And they were not able to eat. And he said, Then bring meal. And he threw into the pot and said, Pour out for the people, and they shall eat. And there was no evil thing in the pot. And a man came from Bel-Shalisha, and brought the man of God bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley, and ripe ears of grain in its husk. And he said, Give to the people, and they ate. And his servant said, What? Should I set this before 100 men? And he said, Give it to the people, and they shall eat. For so says Jehovah, Eat and have some left. And he set before them, and they ate, and left some of it according to the word of Jehovah. Thank you for joining me today for this reading. We will pick back up at 2 Kings chapter 5 and go through chapter 10. God bless you and keep you this day. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.